In this session, I'd like to dive down a little more into what we're preparing people for at stage 1. There's 6 conversations. Look at 6 different areas taken from the qualities. So the first area is vocation to the diaconate or priesthood. And the candidates are given a page of images to have a look at and discuss what these images say to you about vocation to whatever the candidate feels they're called to. So the first one will be talking 5 to 10 minutes about one of these images that had attracted them, and if they don't like images, there are also Bible texts about, to do with vocation, like "Here am I, send me," or "Before I formed you in the womb I knew you," those kind of conversations that quotations that anyone working in discernment will be very familiar with. The second area is the Church in Wales mission and ministry, and in that candidates will be asked to discuss a news story relating to the Church in Wales, maybe from a newspaper or something taken from its news feed on the website. You know, this came up on the website, what do you think about that? Will it help the Church in Wales' mission? Will it not help the Church in Wales' mission? That kind of thing. Candidates are expected to know what the 5 marks of mission are, so I put the quick version down on the bottom just as a catch-up. Then there's communicating the Christian faith. And in that, candidates are asked to bring in an object that means something to them, or they could choose a piece of music, a hymn or a worship song. Someone came up to me quietly at lunchtime and said, "Why not a poem?" And I was saying if they wanted a poem, probably as well, and we really ought to put a poem down there on the thing as well. Something that talks to them about their faith. So, for example, I suppose if I was doing it, I'd talk about my cross, which was my confirmation cross, and its chain has a special significance as well, and all that sort of thing, and what it means to me in my faith and what it says to me about my faith. Then there's a conversation that's about practical and pastoral care. And here they have some wonderful videos of pastoral situations. Normal sort of things that happen in everyday parish life. But there's a conversation, and there's obviously going to be trouble brewing between 2 people. They'll be shown this in advance, and when they come to the conversation, they're asked to discuss, you know, what they thought was going on, what could have been done better, you know, those kind of things. Then, just before, you know, about halfway through, in the actual interview, to see how they cope on their feet, there'll be an email or something has just arrived, maybe from one of the candidates in the discussion, upping the stakes and threatening to leave or sue or something like that. And then they have to respond to the new bit of information, and how does it change what they were saying before, if it changes what they were saying before. Number 5 is living as a disciple, and they have to give a talk of 4 minutes, only 4 minutes out of a half an hour, about how they've been enabled to grow as a disciple or encouraged growth in others. They will be kept closely to the 4 minutes, because sticking to time and not rambling is also an essential skill in this job. I wish we'd all worked it out, but that's just one of the things that's being tested. And finally, engaging with the world. They'll be expected to discuss a film or a book or a news story they've seen in the last 6 months that they think is relevant to one of the 5 marks of mission. These are quite brief conversations, but they do allow the candidates to do something, to prepare something, and to shine. I think one of the weaknesses in our system so far is that people turn up in that room with nothing really in their hands that they can have prepared and say, look, I've done this. And it's because we're looking so much about personality and character in those meetings, sometimes perhaps we overlook competence a little. It's assessing. It's basically getting a bench line of where they are on the journey and what needs to be worked on, what doesn't need to be worked on, or doesn't need to be worked on so hard. So that's the Carousel conversations. I would like to share my list of things that I've noticed coming up as red flags over the years. First first one is no DBS, or a DBS cannot be granted, or the DBS throws back something that causes major concerns. Another one would be not baptised or confirmed. Another one would be there's only been a short time since baptism, or a very short time since they became an Anglican, or a very short time in their current worship environment. Just that they haven't got their feet under the table somehow. Occasionally, if people are getting married or something like that, maybe we would advise them to take some time for the marriage to settle without other stresses. So there's that issue around time. There is the formal issue around divorce and remarriage. That needs to be gone into and the process explained. Any obvious dishonesty in the process is a clear red flag. There are certain age restrictions. The canons of the Church in Wales say that without bishop's dispensation, you can't be ordained before the age of 20, can't be made deacon before the age of 23. And as you get older, some ministries close down to you. Though there might still be a job for NSMs or NSMLs later in life, it's not going to be stipended ministry once you reach the age that you would normally retirement age, basically. Also, another thing that causes problems is a lack of persistence. Many people drop out of the system because they don't make the connections they're asked to make. They don't follow it up, and that's seen as not wanting in it enough. It's also a way of seeing whether they've been forced into it by someone else, because if you give them a task to do and they don't do it, that's probably a thing around. Then there's some more other issues which aren't necessarily red flags, but where they come up, provoke other questions and need to be looked at quite carefully. An obvious one is disability, either physical or mental or a learning disability, because we need to make reasonable adjustments, and what those reasonable adjustments might be and might look like, and also whether that disability has been professionally diagnosed or diagnosed by a doctor internet is sometimes a question. There's a question around money. There used to be a formal bar to ordination if you were in debt, and then mortgages came along and everyone had one, and almost everyone was in debt. But the idea was that if you were in debt, you weren't actually free to get ordained because someone had something huge hanging over your head. So questions around money, debt, previous bankruptcy, things like that, do raise questions that need to be asked. We need to know about it and need to explain all the complicated things about why they can't be trustees and what that will mean in ministry. Previous addiction issues, previous contact with the police would need to be going to for one another, whether that led to a conviction or not. Any issues around violence or anger management, we need to ask about. And you really need to know that they're willing to live the life. About are they and their family aware for what it means to live under canonical obedience, to live a very public life. That's something that needs to be teased out, and you need to be sure they understand it, because no one wants them to go into something and them to say, I didn't know what that meant. We also, in this day and age, need to inquire about their use of the internet. Some of that's around social media, and some of that's around issues of erotica and pornography on the internet. We had a case recently of people who were in a worshipping environment that was not Eucharistic, but were candidating for priestly ministry, which in the Church in Wales, even if whatever your churchmanship, is going to be Eucharistic. And it was something that caused very great consternation and difficulty at the panel that they weren't having regular feeding from Christ in the sacrament. A lot of these red flags don't apply to readers, because once you're ordained, you're that much more public and your private life is that much more scrutinised. That said, ideally, a lot of these questions ought to be asked of readers too, even if the line isn't drawn quite as strictly for readers. Certainly no DBS would apply to readers, not baptised or confirmed. Short time might apply to readers. Divorced and remarried would not apply to readers. That's only a bar to ordination. Dishonesty in the process would. So we can work round some of those for readers.